The queer term evolved past any other word in any language. Back in the day, queer was a slur, marking individuals considered odd or outside social norm. It was often used to refer to others, and not a label you'd proudly use for yourself. In the 60s onwards, people used the word queer as a weapon, usually saying it when attacking or trying to humiliate LGBTQ people.
It wasn't until the 80s when activists began to reclaim it, writing it on their banners and flags when they marched down the street. In the 90s, the term became not only a social movement but a political and academic aspect. This change produced that queer evolved to be part of the market, aka mainstream. Some people within the LGBTQ+ community reject the term due to its history. Who doesn't know the word queer? And the ones who don't will know eventually.
Okay, to understand this part of the video, it's important to know what presentism is in this queer context. Assuming gender and sexual identity of people from the past through our concepts in the present. For instance, saying that heterosexuality has always been the norm is very presentism from your part. When studying societies from the past, we must try to get rid of our own categories related to sexual orientation and identity, in order to discover possible different systems of organization in the past, including diverse ways of understanding sex, identity, gender, or even biological sex.
What's wrong with presentism? When trying to analyze history from heterosexual perspective, there's not been much controversy. But when there's a hypothesis of someone as queer, they seem to be very good friends. All interpretations of history are equally valid. The problem is that some are silenced and others are not. Understanding the concept of gender depends on the culture and the time. There might be cultures with 3 or more genders. Some cultures consider a third gender as intersex. Some others think it's not a matter of kind but a matter of degree.
The example is Galeno de Pergam, who postulated there was only one biological sex. Being a woman was having less degree of gender and being a man was having more degree of it. To know more about how biological sex doesn't determine sexual identity,
we're not experts in history, but we know that the concept of sexual identity came up during the 19th century by the psychiatrist von Krafft-Ebing. What sexual identities have you heard of? Homosexual, heterosexual, bisexual? Actually, the terms homosexuality and heterosexuality were initially defined as morbid desires or attractions, both equally abnormal.
don't misunderstand us. What is taboo in sexuality has always existed. Foucault addressed that sexuality in the past was considered as an act and not as an identity. Prohibited acts during the coitus. In ancient Greece, what was taboo was a matter of position rather than a gender relation. The master being dominated by his pupil, the pupil being dominated by his master.
Buggery during the Middle Ages was a crime not because a homosexual relation, but to demand seed wasting. And incredibly, for women was allowed somehow the same experience as long as they don't.
Matter of chauvinism, there aren't enough sources of information, and most of them are written by men and talk about men's sexuality. However, even when there is mostly information related to men, there is little information about women's sexuality. A case we consider special is Anne Lister. She made a register of her own experience.
Anne Lister was a British woman who lived in the earlier 19th century. She was also known as Gentleman Jack due to her masculine attitudes. We know that gender is something that can change during time to time, but remember that we have some residues of the modern era. For the time, she realized activities that only men could do, such as manage the land, collect leases, and love women. She didn't hide her identity, rather she was very outrageous with her aspirations. What's the most interesting was that she created a code capturing her diaries. She invented this system with a friend for them to communicate their love. They seem to be very good friends. Lister was the kind of person who looked to draw on benefits from marital arrangements, so she actually charmed innocent ladies, something very male for the time. At the end, she could marry her love after chasing her income and walk her in a very small, private, and almost hidden ceremony.
Matter of education. What we know about queer in the past comes from important people. In history, they were the educated people of their times and had the possibility to register how they experienced their sexualities and identities. We'll never know how was the reality of common people regarding queer.
Matter of presentism. Expressions of love in past times may be considered as what was normal at that time, so we cannot say it was queer. For instance, in the Middle Ages, a kiss between vassal and lord was proof of not sexual love, and in some cases, it was custom to share the bed to indicate or establish a political alliance.
What was politically incorrect, or politically correct, or abnormal, or queer. Once was represented by pirates. Very masculine. Piracy has always existed. Even nowadays, every try of taking the booty, sometimes kidnapping, is considered as it, because it happens on the sea. Do you remember the matter of chauvinism? Well, this was no exception during the golden age of piracy. Vessels had gender inequality, and most of their members were men. What a surprise!
Some of the most famous pirates, like Anne Bonny and Mary Read, had to cross-dress to be part of the crew. This situation caused, on one hand, a homosocial environment. Choice and affinity for the same gender, not necessarily sexual or romantic. On the other hand, situational homosexuality, which basically is to meet a physiological need. Any port in a storm. If it was to meet a need or for fun, we don't know. What's clear is that it was pretty common on the boats.
Another curious aspect is that their organization was based on the lack of women. Did someone say lack of women? In 1645, the French governor of Tortuga, in an attempt to make pirates fit in the norm, imported prostitutes to the island to turn them into respectable men, get married, and leave behind the troubled practices.
But if our economics knowledge is right, more supply. Ten years later, they tried to do the same in Barbados because noblemen were coming down with this sickening behavior.
Anyway, this illness seemed to affect them from different sides. Captain Bartholomew Roberts banned women and young men boarding.
Within this organization, there was the matelotage, the civil union of two pirates, a master and his puppet, where everything they earned from raids was equally divided between them. In case of one of them died, the other inherited all his winnings. It is assumed that the matelotage represented not only an economic relationship, but it implied affective bonds. Gay marriage might be, considering that in the 18th century, heterosexual marriages were based on the same benefits. We have the view of masculine pirates, but straight,
Sexuality is a social construct that is understood in different ways depending on the time and the culture. What is natural or kinky changes among cultures, not sexuality itself.
Categories and labels are worthy to make queer visible and connect people from the present with similar stories of people from the past.
But be aware of presentism.
In the same way, you can translate these categories to other living cultures present right now.